Thank you for listening to Geopolitics and Business with me, Thomas Ramge.
And Björn Conrad.
And today, the two of us promise we'll get very operative, very hands-on, as our three guiding questions today are: how can scenario planning help companies to navigate the current geopolitical turbulences? What do tariffs mean actually for pricing and prices? And how can companies build geopolitical knowledge, and where should it be built within the organizations? And our very operative, very hands-on guide to explore these rough waters is Luisa Kinzius. Luisa is a managing partner at Sinolytics and is called in whenever geopolitical risk analyst gets nitty-gritty and attention to detail is needed. Thank you, Lisa, for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our discussion on all of these topics.
What are scenarios? What are they for?
We talk about scenarios managing geopolitical risk. So when do we use them? I think we use them either when we discuss extreme scenarios, right? I want to check in my organization, how good am I prepared for extreme cases, extreme security risk, right? Do I have a resilient setup with my overall organization? Then it's also super helpful to work with scenarios when you are in times of extreme uncertainty, which we have now with the Trump organization, right? You have things are developing extremely fast, for example, with the tariffs, right? It can help you have weekly updates. And in a bigger organization, you have to prepare for the whole set of things that can happen, right? Will I have zero tariff on my semiconductors? Will there be 50%? Will there be 100%? That does make tons of difference for what the options are. How can I react? Can I bear those costs, right? And yes, I think your organization can easily then get lost in that. Nobody knowing how do we react actually? What does the other department do on that? What's the impact on finance? How does procurement do it? How many stocks do we have there? And then working with scenarios, right? Setting them up at the beginning can help you to know what is the range of options we have and then be faster in your responses.
Yeah. No, perhaps I can jump in with kind of zooming out kind of one more step, because I'm also getting enormously interested in kind of this operational use of scenarios, like scenarios beyond just a kind of thinking game into the future, but really kind of making it usable for operations. And as Luisa said, in times of enormous uncertainty, the most adaptable company wins, right? That's what you need for times of geopolitical disruption, because as we have kind of established, geopolitical disruptions, they hit fast, they hit hard, they are often unpredictable. So that means if you just wait until a geopolitical move happens and then you try to calculate what's your best answer, you're going to be enormously late, right? So what I think what makes scenarios really operational is kind of if you start building a model of your operational setup, and you put in all the kind of your options for production, your options for sourcing, your options for pricing, as Luisa just described, right? And then if you build it right, and if you build it smartly, then you end up with a model where you can actually put in the geopolitical disruption, and it will give you options, right? It will give you options right away, and will make you faster in reacting, because it shows you the spectrum of what you can do. You can use it reactively, kind of when something happens, you put it in, and the model gives you fast answers. Or even better, you use it proactively and run scenarios with it, right? And that's where scenarios then become totally operational. You put the scenario in, you see what options are, and then you can kind of also anticipate or kind of have your playbook much more readily available when stuff happens, right?
Historically, I mean, it came out of the military, and that's where the whole method started. Is it a trend right now, Luisa?
I think a lot of people, when they think about scenarios, they think it's the skill to think outside the box, right? I think it is also something, yes, you do need to have very good scenarios. You need to work with the right people to have the expertise, right, that are able to predict all these political developments. But at the end, I think it's just a very practical tool that enables the companies to actually align the decision making across all the departments, because you have so many functions that are affected, right? Björn mentioned it. It is pricing, it is procurement, it is sales. And then in large organization, to get an alignment and get everybody moving and not everybody waiting for the next one, but what do they do? What do they do? How do we respond in this way? But to then look at a scenario and say, the current events we see, this is clearly the trigger that is triggering. Yeah, we are still like in the okay case scenario. We are not yet in the worst case, but we see indications that we're going to move towards that one. And basically we lined out what are our preparatory measures for this scenario, so we can just act without staying in a wait and see mode. So I think that's the key difference, that it's just a helpful tool. And with that, it is a trend in these times of uncertainty. So yes, we definitely, I see it that more and more companies are using that in all different types of scenarios. Maybe sometimes companies are also using it and not calling it scenarios, right? They just have the different cases and assumptions. It's also the question on where do scenarios start, right?
And the more I mean, I've the privilege of knowing some of the work that Luisa does quite well, right? So what always fascinates me is kind of how detailed you can really get, because I kind of scenarios in my head was also kind of the big picture stuff and kind of how's the world shifting, and but if you drill it down, it's a totally useful tool to become also enormously detailed. And then you end up with scenarios and kind of in models where you put in the scenarios where it actually gives you different answers to 15% tariff or 17, right? Kind of, and it gives you a different answer, because it becomes that granular, and that's what you need, because that's where things are shifting at the moment. You have all sorts of very kind of small changes all the time, right? And you have to kind of find quick answers, right?
Luisa, how do you turn these helicopter perspective scenarios we all know, China's attacking Taiwan or whatever, into these detailed plans? And how do the two levels connect?
I think that very much depends on the use case. So it's always the use case that determines the impact of the scenario, right? Do I look at this because I want to know whether my supply chains are resilient? Do I look at this because I want to have the right answer for the US tariffs and see how that is hitting my profit margins and what I have to respond to that? Or do I look at this because I'm thinking about my technology portfolio and I do need to know, do I need to have a separate product development for the Chinese market or a US dominated market, or do I need to have a European version actually for my future AI product? And how do you then actually put it down? You have all those departments in a company that are involved on this question. You get them together on one table and really pin down on a product level, what does this mean for me? And when you look, for example, at the tariffs, yes, you have your production flow. You are producing in the US. You look for this product. Do I manufacture in the US? Where do these products come from? Actually, for tariffs, it's still quite easy, right? It's quite a straight formula. You have your inputs. You put the tariff on it. So you can set up relatively easily financial models that predict your tariff outcome, much easier than, for example, in a supply chain where it's much harder to say what is actually the exact cost effect of a delay if products are stuck in a harbor or something like that. So tariffs is actually the easiest ones, but then it also sounds easy. I do know that it still can take like 50, 100 people in an organization to get all the right numbers. And then it is in the nitty-gritty details. Wait, which HS code classification is this product exactly? Is it exempted? Is it not exempted? Where the customs are again calculating with a different price than so it does get complicated when you are in the details, but yes, you also only get to that level when you basically go through the whole exercise once. And then it is really, really helpful. Like we have seen that the companies do actually really work with this.
Yeah, very important point, I think, because Thomas, you asked about kind of the high level scenarios and then how do you get down. I think one of the lessons here is there's no really sensible middle ground. You have your high level stuff, which is good for your mindset and your kind of preparedness and everything, and that's a kind of a thinking exercise. Or you go into the details and use it operational. But if you do that, then you have to have all the details, right? You have to go all the way down to the nitty-gritty, and this whole middle ground that gives you wrong or kind of useless answers, right? So either you do it as a high level scenario, or you do it and go all the way down to the details, and then it is operational. So beware of the middle ground. I think is one of the lessons I learned.
And I think it also only becomes operational when you have a clear pathway how you want to use the scenarios, right? So it's the one thing to break down the impact across your organization once, right? Be it on the tariffs on all your products, be it basically when you are in a big picture scenario and you want to see, okay, what is generally the risk of a security escalation on supply chains, products, whatsoever. But then you need to have some frequency on when you review these scenarios, right? Who is implementing also those measures? Because, I mean, you do the scenarios and normally you will see, okay, here we have some risk if we basically continue along our base model at the moment, or we can take these or that measures. And if there is nobody who actually tracks that, yeah, well, then it was a nice intellectual exercise, but with limited impact actually. So I think that's key to bring it to action. You need to have somebody who is following up with all the scenarios.
Oh, I understand that. I mean, as with all tools, if you don't use them right, they won't help you very much. But which is also true for every tool, even for Swiss Army knives, is there are limits to where they can really be helpful. Where are the limits of this this very helpful method, this very helpful tool, where we'd say, well, at first it kind of looks as if it could be helpful, but now we'll go another path.
I mean, still also with scenarios, you are working with baseline assumptions, right? I think typically you also stick yourself to 3 scenarios. Maybe you still at your status quo perspective at the moment. You are not predicting each single event, right? So just because you have been doing the scenario analysis, it's not that then basically your geopolitical risk department says, well, we did our job and talk to us in 3 months again. You still have to respond to individual events in between, right? I think we all do know black swan events, etc., something like that. Of course, scenarios also don't protect you against that. And they're also not taking away the burden of then actually taking all the granular measures, right? So they don't do the implementation job for you.
Could you even give you a false sense of being prepared, right? Sort of, I've thought it all through, we've modeled it all in our scenarios, and then, no. That's not how the future played out. We haven't planned that in our scenario planning.
Yeah, I think it's also, you have to be careful in which case do you use those scenarios, right? Also, normally an organization is not capable of running 10 different scenarios, right? So, really also deciding on which geopolitical risk do you, for example, cover in a more big picture scenario. What are your focus regions? Things like that are the difficult choices.
So you've mentioned that it's a good tool for sort of dealing with tariffs and ever-changing tariffs and turbulences. What we know in economics is that tariffs always have a big impact on prices and on pricing. So let's move to our second lead question of today, our second guiding question. How does right now the tariff politics and policies of Trump affect pricings? Who will bear the cost, Swiss pharma or US consumers?
It depends, right? and
both possibly.
both possibly. And yes, I mean, we do see some first signals, right? And also just looking at who is able to pass through prices it are those players that are uniquely positioned through their quality offerings that have a clear distinction versus their competitors, where they can better position themselves. And those players who are in the commodity markets, where you have tons of alternatives, of course, have much more difficulties to pass through prices. Yes, I think with that it is as a company, you do know that price setting is one of the most complicated and sensitive issues. And I think the companies are responding in very different ways at the moment, and differently advanced also on understanding the price sensitivities of their clients. At least that is what I see when I talk to the organizations. Yes, I think a lot of ongoing conversations in the company is also how to actually do that and looking for best practices.
No, I would definitely agree that kind of pricing and kind of going back to the drawing board in many ways and kind of getting your old price elasticity calculations that companies have done at some point. That's definitely coming back, because kind of tariffs have exactly that effect, right? Kind of every company, kind of success of a company, at least in the short term, will quite significantly rely on their ability to make a good judgment on kind of what customers are willing to pay in terms of pass-through costs of tariffs, right? And what is obviously not only kind of what is the price elasticity of my own product, but also kind of what is a competition going to do, right? And for that as well, kind of this kind of having clear scenarios, kind of where tariffs are going, kind of can definitely help figuring out kind of what the price ranges are, because then you can not only look at you and see how kind of because tariffs basically kind of in terms of costs to be borne by the company or passed on to the consumer, tariffs also kind of affect different companies differently depending on mainly on their production footprint, right? And kind of where do they ship stuff, right? Simply put.
What now changes, right? Because you've always been looking at your competitors also very much on, okay, what type of innovation do they do?
Exactly.
How is their product exactly compositioned? And this whole thinking that suddenly your setup of your supply chains and production footprint from a regional perspective becomes more important already changed over the last couple of years, with geopolitics becoming more important. And with the tariffs now, it's actually even more important to actually, and you can get quite a lot of information on your competitors as well, right? You ask the question, well, do they manufacture this specific product in the US? Do they ship it from Mexico? Where's actually their supply chain located? To get a sense of under how much pricing pressure are my competitors, to know what is the leeway you have to also increase prices, right? When you are in a market where everybody imports from China into the US, it's easier to pass through the additional price increase to your customers when you are the only one and everybody else is already with their manufacturing facility in Vietnam and, well, is therefore better off.
No, yeah, perhaps to put it shortly, geography of your setup kind of used to only a couple of years ago was kind of such a minor factor in kind of how companies would think about prices, and now it's all of a sudden it's huge, right? It's the geography of your global footprint is a determining factor of prices all of a sudden, right? And that's something totally new also, or at least it hasn't been that way in a long time.
So how do you approach that in an intelligent way? So pricing is always also about competition. So in changing price schemes in times where prices change a lot, there must be also a big opportunity for those who get the prices right.
I think you have to do a product by product assessment where what is the price sensitivities of my customers for this very specific product, what is the competitor setup, but then also looking into what has been my track record in increasing prices in the past, right? What have I been in a similar situation during the COVID situation? How did the customers reacted back then, right? Also, just opening each contract, looking into that one, saying, does it have a tariff adjustment clause? No. I mean, first of all, give out the direction that any new contract will have this clause. And then like you can also go through your priority list, right? And say, well, I first do care about every new contract, and then I think about longer running contracts. It's also not only price increases with your customers, right? It can also be what is my leeway towards my suppliers, actually, in which positions are they? How much single source suppliers do I have? And then I think it is really a case by case judgment and extremely careful communication strategy, right? I mean, you might have your priority clients, you have clients with better relations and worse relations. And I think then it is coming up with a ranking on how to approach them when. And then looking back at your scenarios, right? Also to see where's pressure the highest on which type of product, where do I need to act earliest? And then also thinking about the right communication strategy, right? I think also what I hear is also companies do understand the situations it's all over, right? That the whole supply chains are stretched by the tariffs. So at least your case is sometimes clear. But also making it difficult because you don't want to know your clients to know your exact profit margin, right? You cannot just put the price on top, the tariff on top of it.
Yeah, and any examples that pop up in your mind where you see, okay, that there's a sector, there are companies who and obviously it's hard for you, you cannot call out names of your project, but an example where you see, okay, they've done their homework and do it right. They have the right strategic approach to price under this level of uncertainty and under this level of basically changing supply chains and so forth.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely like different groups or different sectors also kind of also you can see now which sectors are dealing with pricing anyhow on a daily level. Okay, basically everything that is kind of consumer product, including cars, by the way, right? But also kind of like more fast moving consumer products, everything that kind of goes to an end user, basically kind of their pricing is basically such a big part of everyday operations, and they're kind of and that's an advantage and a disadvantage, right? These companies, they have the internal structures also to kind of to change pricing fairly frequently at a fast pace to adjust to other conditions. But then also the negative side of that is there are these new things that are coming in, geopolitical impacts on price. They do work differently, right? As Luisa has outlined, right? Tariffs and such, they have a different logic behind it. They have a different, also they are very fast and so on and so forth. They impact very fast. So that means that the kind of this traditional setup that these companies have dealing with pricing might also be a burden to some degree, because they have to kind of the mindset has to go beyond that, and kind of this geopolitical muscle needs to be built. But still, on average, I would still think that those companies where daily pricing decisions is basically ingrained in their DNA, they have a much easier time than all of the companies that kind of machinery or whatever that is B2B business, mainly B2B business. They deal with this totally differently, and are not as used to really rapid changes. They are kind of used to very long-term contracts that run for years, and you fix your pricing, and then that's what it is, right? And that is not that doesn't lend itself to kind of fast adaptation to changing circumstances.
No, not the place you want to be in right now, right?
Yeah, and I think that matches quite well what we see, right? I mean, the US retailers, Walmart, they did increase prices for electronics, for some toys. I think also, was it Honda, Toyota, who reported some price increases for selective models in the US? Well, yes, on the B2B, of course, transparency and is different. And I think there it also will take slightly longer. And there it also very much depends. On the other hand, in the B2B business, you might have clients that just trust in your quality so much, in your quality or very specifics, or that just don't have a choice to deviate because their products are so much reliant on your very specific supplies that you also have good chances to transfer your prices.
So what are your guesses? Will the U.S. tariffs really foster inflation in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, the first numbers were okay-ish, right? But I think that might also just
they
be...
were surprisingly low. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, but that might also be due to the fact that it does take time until everything settles in, and we did have the tariff forces and uncertainty how it continues. So, just as an economist looking at the math, I think inflation has to go up. Yes.
No, yeah, I would also think it. It's inevitable. How much we'll see, right? And that's also debatable. But I think that it takes some time also has something to do with kind of price, like passing through prices, like actually increasing prices of your product, also always in a competitive situation. That's not an easy decision, right? Kind of that's a major step, right? Companies are thinking really long and hard about it, and as long as kind of also the tariff situation was uncertain and they kind of everything kind of goes online, then back roll again and kind of and pause here and so on and so forth. So everything was and is still kind of very volatile. And in that situation, many companies, I think, will choose to just keep prices steady, just bear the immediate cost, just to make sure that they don't go too fast in increasing prices and then have the backlash later against the competition, perhaps, right? So I think the more this tariff game also settles a little bit and it becomes clearer, the more the companies will also decide on passing through prices. Prices will go up. Inflation will increase. Yes, I think at the end everything is going to be as predicted, I guess. Take some time.
You're going to do some scenario playing on that one. No, on that one again. No. Okay, time is running. Let's move to our third question, and that is basically connected to the first two. I mean, in order to do good scenarios, in order to do to strategic pricing in the context of geopolitical uncertainties, you need geopolitical knowledge within your organizations. And let's delve a little bit into the good old questions. Where should this knowledge be built? I mean, different options could be sort of attached to strategy to some extent. I mean, traditionally, often within government relations. What's your take on that, Luisa? Where do you see that companies have done a good job in implementing and building geopolitical knowledge within their organizations, have done it in a way that this knowledge can also spread and can also have impact?
It's interesting because you ask about where to build the knowledge and not where to manage geopolitics. Because I think I would have I personally have an extremely clear view on this, that I feel a strategy has to be involved, or any department that does your strategy, right? It is not every company has. Yeah, I mean, the large ones all have their strategy departments, but the smaller ones, is it the CEO or CEO office? But I think strategy has to be involved because it is typically the section that actually decides on the risk appetite of a company. It is also the department that has then that takes decisions on the product portfolio, on all the operational impacts of geopolitics, and is typically the department and function within a company that is able to translate the impact and steer implementation of all the response measures. Does the knowledge on geopolitics has to be in that function as well? No, right? That's basically, do you decide on building your knowledge in-house or buy it externally? All possible, right? I think we do see now that a lot of companies, especially the larger ones, are building big in-house teams, up to 5-10 people working on geopolitics. Some develop their own geopolitical scenarios, others buy additional expertise on that one. So yes, clearly there's a trend to significantly step up expertise, and that is very often within the government affairs department, and might also be very well positioned there because those are the ones with the best contacts into politics. It's also the skills you need, right? Having the political understanding and stuff is typically in those functions, or people who would apply for such functions. And then you can still see how do you translate and connect that, for example, with your strategy department, with your finance department, with your sales and procurement, how you basically ensure that this knowledge is not only within this, that doesn't stay within this department, because I think we are no longer in a time where you just observe geopolitics and you occasionally write a memo to your
What's a
CEO
nice hobby, isn't
on,
it?
okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
I like.
I would love to do that.
I like to read The Economist. Excellent.
Yeah, true, right? Yeah, and I mean, I think that was actually how a lot of companies also managed it in the past, right? Yeah, reading The Economist is fine. You as a CEO have a good view on this, and yeah, occasionally having a little bit of a chat or review on this, fine. But I think by now you do need to have some kind of quarterly review, not only of your financials, but actually also the geopolitical risk. And then that needs a more structured approach, I think.
No, and I think the distinction that Luisa just made is crucial. It's between we're talking about building geopolitical muscle. So you have your geopolitical brain, right? And that is kind of the knowledge, kind of understanding what is happening and how it impacts you, and also kind of like ability to forecast geopolitical moves. So that's all kind of building up geopolitical brain, I would say. And there are the departments that are kind of that are well positioned to do that. And I think many companies are also moving really fast on that, kind of building more brain on this kind of analytical capacity. But then the interesting part is really, or the much perhaps even more difficult part, is to build the geopolitical muscle, meaning kind of then building the connection between the brain and the different departments to actually react, to actually or act, even better than react, act upon geopolitical risk, right? And actually make the changes that need to be done. And then it becomes kind of geopolitics, kind of as it is viewed by a sourcing manager, right? A production side manager, right? Those are the people that at the end will actually have it in their hands to actually make the right adjustments. And that's the muscle that you need, right? These kind of layers of a company, they need then to be they need to have the geopolitical expertise that is enough to kind of make the right adjustments. So the brain really has to connect with the muscle within the company. Otherwise, it's just it's just a thinking exercise, right? I think that connection, that's going to be. And that's what from what I see is that's the most difficult part for companies to establish, that connection between the brain that needs what knows what needs to be done and the muscle that actually does it.
So we know the problem now. How you do it? I mean, okay. Now we know we need the neural link between the geopolitical brain and the geopolitical muscle. Luisa, how do you help companies?
Yeah, it actually connects to what we discussed beforehand, right? Because I would say scenario building very often starts in the brain, right? You build your scenarios. And then you can also still go the first step in mapping down the impact across your different departments. You say, this is the impact based on the information I get from my sales department, from my procurement department, from the R&D department, how they think about the future portfolio footprint, whatever. But then if you stop there, the muscle it's just not, you go to the fitness studio once, but you have to go continuously, right? So you basically have to transfer that action and task into the functions, right? And I think then it also doesn't need to stay within a strategy department, but you have to establish that the responsible managers in the sales, procurement, etc. departments continuously also have these geopolitical risk and impacts on their mind and take decisions accordingly. And I think, how do you achieve that actually? I mean, for some it's imminent, right? I think all the supply chain managers have made enough experience recently how big an impact of export controls, etc., is, so that they also have an interest in becoming closer connected to the government affairs department, being in a more regular exchange, etc. And I think with these things, when it has a specific and concrete impact, you also naturally get into processes where you where these impacts are considered, and where you also build up a certain expertise within these functions. And I think then it can get very operational, and that sometimes doesn't even need the government affairs department anymore, but just the procurement manager that exactly decides, okay, what do I do with this export controls? Or that is going back to the government affairs department asking, well, I have seen this export control on these specific raw materials, which ones are next, right? And once you have set up those channels, the needs are there, so they're going to be used anyway.
And actually, if that happens, what Luisa just described, that the operational level basically goes kind of seeks out information, right, from government affairs, from strategy, wherever the information is stored within the org or created in the company. But then you have done, as a company, then you have done something seriously right in the past, that you have kind of created this level of kind of foresight and responsibility within every operational arm, that they actually proactively kind of ask and say, we need this geopolitical information. We need to know kind of what is going to be the export quota for X and what is the likelihood in the next 3 years or so. We need to know that to do good operations, right? And if you have achieved that, then you have kind of taken the first step and you have done something right in the past already. And if you don't have that, then every company needs to build that, right? Because without that, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and for example, I know of companies, they might not actually, I don't even know whether it's so much on the geopolitical risk frame, but they have just like steerco committees. You meet with your management, you have the CEO in there, you have somebody from the IT department on there deciding on, okay, how fragmented will AI strategies actually have to be must be. Then you have somebody from procurement in that round, you have somebody from finance in that round, and they all listen to the updates on the geopolitical scenarios, and then basically can take that back into their functions and take the decisions accordingly. And I think what's important is to have an aligned view again within your organization.
You've been stretching that topic of alignment several times in this conversation. When you're having discussions with management in the context we've discussed in this podcast, Luisa, what's the most overlooked topic you find when you get out of the room saying, oh, we've again have not touched a point that is very important that nobody has on the radar?
I mean, we don't only look at geopolitical risk, but also look a lot at China opportunities. I feel I'm currently repeating myself sometimes in saying, well, despite all the risks, don't ignore opportunities, right? Especially, for example, in this field of AI, right? Like, see how much commercialization is happening in China on this, and that people should not get shrugged away and say, well, everything is going down the river, being divergent, and we can't use anything. So still looking at and seeing the opportunities in all of this. That is one topic that immediately comes to my mind.
That's a brilliant one, first of all, I would say.
Otherwise, you might have a good idea.
The world is going south, but hey, some things improve. There is opportunity.
Everyone is in crisis mode to some degree at the moment, right? So things are changing fast. People are kind of worried about it, and not a whole lot of things are not going well. And that does kind of create like knee-jerk reactions. We have to change everything. Kind of everything is risk, right? And we have to kind of make and we have to kind of see everything through this lens of risk. I mean, Luisa already covered the part that there's opportunities as well, sure. But then also how you look at risk is also kind of, it needs to be calibrated, needs to be balanced, right? Because for the supply chain example is always my go-to example for this, right? Like everyone is kind of now thinking about changing their supply chains. But what everyone needs to be really extremely aware of that supply chains are as they are for a reason, because they have been set up exactly like that because that's how they work best or have worked best in the past. That means every change you make will cost money. There's no free way of almost no cost-free way of changing your supply chain, right? So that means you have to balance this. You have to you have to be. Of course, there's risk and there's new risks and there's new disruption, but you also have to kind of calculate that against the cost of mitigation, basically, and be sober about it, right? Kind of have a clear calculation here, cost benefit, kind of where do we make the changes and where doesn't it make sense to make any changes, and not just be kind of do panic changes, right? Because those are the worst. I think that's almost that's also kind of calibrating your risk assessment is, I think, very important, and especially in times where everyone is in crisis mode and then kind of tends to go overboard with risk being everything.
And I think what we're also going to see next is we have a big attention on the big markets, China and the US, but how actually this relationship will spill over into other markets, that I think going to be one of the next big topics. And yes, I think we see it, Xi Jinping gathering with Putin and all the other stakeholders there, and how much attention he there gets, and that actually it is beyond taking decisions on your China market and your US market, probably also your European market. You have to think, and this division of markets and product portfolios will extend also into ASEAN and into your Middle East. So it is not that you only need China for China solutions within China, but you might need those also in other China-aligned markets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Let's build some scenarios on that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. No. Thank you, Lisa, for heaps of it of advice as hands-on advice, and for closing with an optimistic, constructive perspective on this whole topic, as we talk as much about risk these days. Thank you, Björn, as always, and thank you to you, dear listeners and viewers. If you like our podcast, please consider leaving us a review or rating in your podcast app, and please click to the subscribe button so you will not miss out on our next episodes. You can email us at podcast@geo-lytics.com. Björn and I, the two of us, will be back in 4 weeks from now. And until then, as always, stay sane at the crossroads of geopolitics and business.